Hello and welcome. My name is Jacqueline Pollauf and I'm so pleased that you've joined me today for this concert of Welsh composers for the harp. As usual, the performance will last about 30 minutes and the program is below in the description, but I'll also announce the program as we go along and say a bit about each piece in the composer. And the chat is open if you'd like to say anything there. You can also feel free to post any questions you might have about the music in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer through the chat as well. I'm using my new tech setup again today, so I've actually uploaded the concert just a little bit in advance. And because of that, I'll be able to answer the chat questions in real time since I can just be at my computer looking at those as we're going along. I'm finding that this new tech setup is definitely reducing my stress level. Just last week I woke up and I had a text on my phone from my internet provider announcing that there would be no internet for a few hours, and I was so relieved that I wasn't live streaming anything that day. These things can be very difficult and challenging. But as I mentioned today, the theme is Welsh composers, and I'm going to be playing 3 different pieces by 2 different composers, John Thomas and John Parry. And both Thomas and Parry were virtuoso harpists as well as composers. Wales has a strong tradition of the harp as an instrument there, and there's so much beautiful music and some really impressive harpists like these 2, Thomas and Parry, that have come from Wales. So I'm really excited about this theme and to be playing more Welsh music. The first piece that I'm going to start with is by John Thomas. He lived from 1826 to 1913, and he came from a really musical family. His father actually was an amateur musician, and several of his siblings also played the harp. He was quite an impressive harpist with a very distinguished career. He ended up teaching at the Royal College of Music, and he was appointed the harpist to Queen Victoria. As a composer, he wrote quite a bit of music for solo harp, some of which I'll be playing today. But he also wrote an opera, 2 harp concertos, a symphony, and a bit of chamber music. So really he did quite a bit as a composer, as well as just playing the harp. This first piece that I'm going to start with is called Watching the Wheat. And Watching the Wheat is a Welsh folk song that Thomas has here arranged for solo harp. I think it would be more traditional to hear the piece with a singer and some sort of accompaniment, quite possibly the harp, but here the harp is going to do everything. And first you'll hear an introduction, setting everything up, and then Thomas has the song presented in its entirety in a pretty simple setting. So you'll just hear the melody singing out with chords to accompany that, and I think it's really a beautiful presentation of the song. After that, there's a bit of a dramatic transition, and from there we have the entire melody one more time, but this time much more complex than the first time. Thomas has kind of embedded the melody in a set of arpeggios, so you'll see my hands trading off and crossing over and really using a lot of the range of the harp, all while surrounding that beautiful melody. So here is Watching the Wheat by John Thomas. Next, I'd like to play a piece by John Parry, another Welsh harpist and composer, but who lived a bit earlier than John Thomas. Parry lived from 1710 to 1782, and he was really highly regarded for his skills on the harp. He was the harpist for Sir Watkin Williams Wynne, and in addition to performing in Wales, he also spent quite a bit of time at Sir Watkin Williams Wynne's house in London, and so he performed extensively in London as well. And amazingly enough, Parry was blind from birth, so he achieved all of this musical skill and acclaim and everything on an instrument where he couldn't actually see the strings. Kind of an amazing idea. And in addition, of course, to his performing, he composed a bit. Possibly he is the composer of the well-known Christmas carol, Deck the Halls. Quite exciting. And the harp that John Parry played was a Welsh triple harp. That is quite a different instrument than this much more modern harp that I'm playing here, the double action pedal harp. And the Welsh triple harp was named for its 3 rows of strings. So rather than a single row like this, there were 1, 2, and then 3 rows of strings vertically up and down. And one way to think of how those strings operated is that the outside rows were the naturals and the inside row was the accidentals. So if you were to take a piano keyboard and turn it upright, you would have all of the white keys, all of the naturals. Then you would have all of the black keys, which are the sharps and flats. And then on the triple harp, it would be as if you had another row of the white keys. And this setup meant that since you're coming at it from the side when you play, both your right hand and your left hand would be able to access those outside rows of strings, the naturals, quite easily. And then both could reach in between. The strings were offset to access all of the accidentals as you needed those. So as you can imagine, this was a really complex instrument that Parry played and was composing for. And I think it must have required a lot of contortion to be able to navigate through the 3 rows of strings. Welsh triple harps are still around today and still played, although I've personally never had the chance to play one. And so this piece that I'm about to play, his Sonata in D major, was written for the Welsh triple harp, but I think it translates pretty well to this more modern harp. Not much is needed in terms of changes. The edition that I'm going to be playing was edited by harpist David Watkins. And this Sonata in D comes from a set of 4 sonatas. It has 3 movements. The first movement you'll hear is quite sprightly and cheerful. There's a lot of passages of 16th notes, and I think those really provide momentum throughout it. Then the second movement is a lot slower and maybe a bit melancholy. And it's split into 2 parts. So first you'll hear the melody with chords accompanying, and then you hear the melody one more time, but the second time there are a lot of 16th notes kind of filling in the structure and just giving it a bit more embellishment. And then we end with the third movement, which is much quicker and more lively, kind of returning to that bit of a bouncy and joyous feel similar to the first movement. But it does have the same structure as the second movement. Well, first you'll hear everything in a fairly straightforward fashion, and then it comes back a second time around, but with a more elaborate and more filled in sort of approach to it. So this is the Sonata in D major, written by John Parry. I wanted to end today with another piece by John Thomas, the first composer that we heard. This is David of the White Rock. And I thought it would be quite nice to have two pieces by Thomas to kind of bookend the program. But also these are just two pieces that I've been wanting to learn for a little while. So I was very excited to have this opportunity to learn them and perform them for the first time today. Thomas, in growing up, actually was playing initially the Welsh triple harp, the same kind of harp that John Parry played. And when Thomas was 14, he went to London and learned to play the double action pedal harp, a harp like this one. And not only did he learn to play this very different instrument, but he really mastered it and became a virtuoso of it. And so in his composing, he was writing very specifically for a pedal harp like this one. And the compositions of his that I've played would not be playable on the Welsh triple harp. They're quite different in the way that he uses the full range of the instrument. He writes in keys that are really oriented to the pedal harp. And then he also makes a lot of use of enharmonics. An enharmonic is when you have two strings that sound the same. For example, I could play an F sharp and a G flat on two separate strings, but they result in the same sounding pitch. And that's something that's very unique to the pedal harp. I'm sure many people watching are quite familiar with how the pedal harp works, but just in case, I will give a brief overview of how it contrasts to the Welsh triple harp. So on the pedal harp, we just have a single row of strings, but each string has 3 different positions. So for example, this G string could be a G flat, a G natural, or a G sharp. And to change between those positions, there's little discs here that rotate and shorten the length of the string. And then those discs are connected through the hollow column of the harp down to the pedals around the base of the harp. And by moving the pedals, you can alter the position of the strings, and therefore you can keep playing and be moving your feet and modulate through different keys or add accidentals as needed. But because each string has 3 positions, then we have these enharmonics, these kind of redundancies built in, which some people find really strange. No other instrument has that, but some harpists use that beautifully in their composing, and I think John Thomas certainly does for a lot of his arpeggio sections. He's making great use of that feature. So David of the White Rock is quite similar compositionally to Watching the Wheat. It is also based on a folk song, and there's a similar approach where you hear the melody one time presented quite simply, and then again in a much more complex pattern. In between, there's also these sections with repeated chords in the left hand and octaves in the right hand that I really enjoy. When we do have that complex melody with arpeggios, it's a bit changed from what we heard in Watching the Wheat. In David of the White Rock, the right hand is playing all of the arpeggios, these very fast, very complicated patterns, while the melody is simply in the left hand, a nice low melody down there with this much higher accompaniment to it. And another big difference between the 2 pieces is that Watching the Wheat was in a major key, so it had kind of a peaceful feeling, maybe a feeling of contentedness. But David of the White Rock is in a minor key, and I think it really has a feeling of sadness to it, which the lyrics certainly are very sad, and I think possibly that's where this feeling comes from. Of course, the folk song was written in Welsh, but I was looking at some different translations, and they really vary, the English translations, a lot. So I'm not sure how literal this translation is, but this is a translation I found that I quite liked. Here are the lyrics for David of the White Rock. "Bring me," said David, "the harp I adore. I long ere death calls me to play it once more. Help me to reach my beloved strings again. On widow and children God's blessing remain. Last night I heard a kind angel thus say, David, fly home on the wings of thy lay. Harp of my youth and thy music adieu. Widow and children, God's blessing on you." So here is David of the White Rock by John Thomas. Thank you all so much for coming. I really enjoy getting to explore some different repertoire and some different themes in these concerts, since it's such a pleasure to have everyone attend and explore all of that with me. Information about how to make a voluntary contribution is below in the description through either PayPal or Venmo, and of course any amount is appreciated. Next month, my next online concert will be on December 16th, and that will be a holiday concert. So I'm quite looking forward to that. I also have a few live concerts upcoming in December, and more information about everything is available on my website. So if you have any more questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and then I will respond the same way. Because this is an online concert rather than a true live stream, it does kind of end a little bit abruptly. So hopefully I will get to everyone's questions and comments and everything before YouTube ends it all. But if for some reason I'm mid-answer or something, I'll just put it in the regular comments for the video. So you'll be able to see it there rather than in the chat if for some reason it cuts me off. But thank you all again so much for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day.